Hi. Assalamualaikum. We are now live. Again, congratulations to our competitors for making it to the debate finals. And I look forward to a great debate. Aqsa, you have been assigned the position of the negative. And Yasin, you have been assigned the position of the affirmative. So you guys will be referred to as that from now on. The debate topic is social media companies ought to be legally responsible for content posted by users on their platforms. So this round will be a bit different. I will be calling on you to speak, and you guys will have 5 minutes of silent prep time, and your time starts now.
Hiba, I think one of the competitors took a second away. If you check the chat.
Oh.
Oh, okay. She's back.
I'll be putting the topic in the chat. time is just about up. Now we will be starting with the debate. So, affirmative, can you please give your constructive speech for 6 minutes?
Should I start?
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. In 2022, about 97.9% of Facebook's global revenue, which is worth $84 billion, was generated from advertising. TikTok's ad revenue was $27 billion in 2020. More the users, greater the ad revenue. Businesses' goal is to reach as many users as possible. Simple equation, correct? Now, who else is targeting mass attention? Criminals, terrorists. In fact, as per Professor Wilkinson, social media platforms in the form of Twitter and Facebook have developed a socialistic symbiosis with terrorists as both targets common mass. Reports show online predators use teen app TikTok to solicit children. It's not me alone vocalizing that social media should be responsible for the content on their platform. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg said the company ought to be regulated as something in between a telecommunications company and a newspaper. That same day, Facebook released a white paper laying out the approach it would prefer regulators take. When the leader of social media makes himself accountable as a responsible social citizen, how could we not hold social media responsible for the content that's published on their site? Social media has vested interest to have broader and larger subscriptions as their ad revenue depends on the number of viewers. However, did we forget that minutes before the shooting in El Paso, the Poway Synagogue, the Christchurch Mosque, the shooters posted hate-filled anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, and anti-Islam, xenophobic manifestos on popular messaging forums? Manifestation of extremism in social media makes the extremist hero among the similar-minded people and encourages extreme behavior among others. That's why we need to stop public viewing of such manifestos. The only way this can be achieved is by making platforms accountable for what's published on their site. If the social media gets penalized for posting, they'll be looking at the subscriber's profile or continuously looking at what is going on before allowing their subscription. This will reduce the number of extremists in social media. The cyber system of social media is the first point of being aware of the criminal act. Therefore, only they can stop such a manifesto from being publicized. Action of justice systems after such posting is a reactive measure, whereas we need proactive measures to stop such crime. We don't want to put a Band-Aid anymore. We want to cure the disease. To cure the disease, we need the body to be treated. The body, in this case, is social media, which is not only allowing such criminals to grow, it is also making the vulnerable population exposed to them. If social media is held responsible for the postings, they'll be more diligent to monitor their platforms and stop such crimes to spread. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech. However, this comes with a social responsibility, justice for all. When our speech becomes a reason for others' death, when our act destroys someone's privacy, how do we conform with this justice for all? News channels, newspapers, movies, advertisement industries, all of these medias are using platforms to vocalize people's opinions and promote free thinking. However, there are editors of the newspaper and censorships for films and advertisements. Leadership of these organizations are held responsible for the information they publish. Then why don't cyber publishers like social media be accountable for the content published on their platform? Should we continue to ignore justice for all in the name of freedom of speech? In the guise of freedom of speech? Extensive monitoring and proactive measures will increase the expense of social media companies and decrease the profit margin. There is no financial benefit for social media, but the health of American democracy and the protection of our people is more important than allowing these companies and their shareholders to continue to profit from allowing propagandists to spread lies and groups to organize violent action on their platforms. Protecting democracy, individuals' privacy, stopping the propaganda and hate crime are our prime responsibilities for the last 4 years, for forever. For the last 4 years, social media networks provided a venue for conspiracies like QAnon, which was cracked down in 2020 from all social media platforms, but the damage was already done. What about the even crazier conspiracy theories that are lurking in a few corners today, but may blow up tomorrow. Even after the Capitol Hill attack, did we not learn our lesson that we need to hold social media responsible for their content so they become more proactive than reactive? Over the years, social media became a facilitator for crime. I'm sure we all remember that a young female child was sold in South Sudan using Facebook to increase the bidding price. While a false rumor spreading in WhatsApp in Mexico led an angry mob to burn 2 innocent men alive. Perhaps most infamously, Facebook has singled out as a primary facilitator in the Myanmar genocide. Under our law, a person is guilty of criminal facilitation in the 4th degree, so why not social media for their published content? The US federal law section 320 of the Communication Decency Act states no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by any other information content provider. When the most consequential law governing speech on the internet was created in 1996, a year before social media, Google.com didn't even exist. Mark Zuckerberg was only 11 years old. Time has changed, so has our social dynamics and mode of crime. The federal law has helped Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and countless other internet companies flourish. But Section 230, liability protection also extends to fringe sites known as for hosting hate speech, anti-Semitic content, and racist tropes like 8chan. As noted by U.S. Attorney General William Barr, no longer are tech companies the underdog upstarts. They have become titans. So let's hold the titans responsible for their act and save democracy and establish justice for all. Thank you.
Time is up. Thank you. And now the negative may apply their cross-examination to the affirmative for 3 minutes. So whenever you're ready.
May I have 2 minutes to just compose my thoughts?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Okay, you may give your cross-examination for 3 minutes. You
So I would
can
like to-
start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So I'd like to begin by thanking the affirmative for their points of view. And some of the questions that I had for you was, are you aware of the limitations currently imposed by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act on social media websites?
Yes, I know that it is restricting child pornography and various other things.
Yes. And do you know what those various other things are?
Yes, I do.
Can you please elaborate on them?
Yeah, so there are terrorist attacks or anything that basically can infringe on the security of a group of people or any child or anybody, actually.
And then could you please elaborate on the differences between a telecommunication, like the limitations placed on telecommunication and newspapers?
Yes, definitely. So newspapers, if there's found any libel or anything that is false or can defame anyone, they can be repealed and the government can actually sue them and shut down the newspapers. While as telecommunications, the communications can be tracked and listened to. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. And then how is this going? How do you believe that social media is going to fit in the middle with this? Like, where is it going to fall in terms of legal responsibility?
So thank you for that question. Actually, Mark Zuckerberg puts it in the best way possible. He says that there are regulations, and one of these regulations is accountability for what is posted. Like newspapers, they wouldn't be sued, but because of their accountability, because of their widespread use all over the world, just not in the United States, they would be told how to do better, and they will be penalized according to the thing that is posted on their website or platform. Sorry.
So you mentioned that social newspapers are posted worldwide. Social media is also something that is present worldwide, correct? how would the logistics of that work? How can we base restrictions of social media based on the United States Constitution when it is something that is international?
So actually newspapers are relatively less global than than social media platforms, as newspapers are now long outdated. They're not used as much. So there are newspapers that have more effect are usually regional or national, but social media is sort of unified across all borders. And they're not being printed. And I feel like you know the differences. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted you to elaborate on what would be the legal restrictions, or what would be the restrictions in implementing changes or restrictions on social media on a legal basis globally, because every country has different laws.
So yeah, 100%. But if you know that the United Nations actually does control, and whenever there's anything like a terrorist attack or any suspicion of, the UN can intervene at the request of the nation. So similarly, it would be if there's a viable threat, the United States' job is to penalize these corporations, and but if it's a global threat, then the UN can pitch in and come and help.
Thank you. The negative will give their cross-examination for 7 minutes. Would you like any prep time in between?
Yes, please.
Time is up. Negative, will you please offer your constructive speech for 7 minutes? You may start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So I'd like to begin by thanking the judges for being here today and thanking the affirmative for their point of view. So before I begin, I would like to address the resolution itself. Because the affirmative did not specify the scope of the resolution was limited to the United States, I would like to expand it to international users as well. And this will be pertinent to a later contention that I will bring up. So before I begin, I want to talk about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. As the affirmative also mentioned, this act already has certain limitations, including child pornography, exploitative information, and certain terrorist or acts that violate criminal intellectual property law violations that are already in place. So there are, as you can see, there are already laws in the United States that cover social media use and that limit the extent of which what users can post on social media. The only limitation is that legally, social media websites are not held responsible. They can't be taken to court. They can't be sued for what other users post on their website. And then this brings me to my first contention point. Why do we punish the messenger? Or in this case, the publisher? This has been a decade-long saying of, if someone's purpose is to solely give you a message, they shouldn't be the one who you should take out your anger on, take out your hatred on. So if someone posts a YouTube video making a false claim that someone is a perpetrator or someone is a criminal, and that video is reported and YouTube takes it down, YouTube should not be still held responsible for hosting that video in the first place. It took the necessary steps to address the problem when the concern was brought to their attention. And as such, they shouldn't be taken to court and they shouldn't be the ones being sued. If there's a problem, then the user should be the one who is legally responsible. The second contention that I wanted to bring up was the reason the Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act was initially created was to protect the internet and to protect the freedom and allow it to flourish and grow. So if lawsuits continue to pop up against social media companies because millions of users use them worldwide, then these lawsuits can harm their businesses. And in fact, there was actually a case with Hulk Hogan versus Gawker, which was a newspaper site. So that falls under being legally responsible, and where because of the settlement, the newspaper site actually ended up going bankrupt. And they were unable to pay the dues for the court processes. So in this scenario, if their social media companies start being legally held responsible, this will just become a fight of whoever has more money. And then this can then turn into a fight of whoever has more, not only whoever has more money, but also the motives behind their actions. The third contention that I had was social media is not limited to the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the First Amendment does apply to social media use. So if we begin limiting the content users post, that is going to infringe upon their freedom of speech, and that is incorrect and that is wrong. And we've seen this happen with Marsh versus Alabama, where that was a private sector town where one company, one monopoly owned everything in that town, and that town was still held, they still retained their freedom of speech, their First Amendment rights. So even on social media, people still retain their freedom of speech and they retain their right to address political issues. And if content starts being limited on social media because of privacy or security concerns, that can have a detriment to activism, that can have a detriment to limiting minority voices, and that can be detrimental to democracy in itself. The next idea that I wanted to bring up was this idea of giving up our liberties for a sense of security. There's no telling that just because social media is able to, if social media is legally responsible for limiting our resources, that's actually going to do anything. And that can be logistically problematic in itself. And this is where I'm going to go back to how I previously mentioned, if it includes international users, that means that we can apply the values of the United States Constitution to international users. They have their own laws, they have their own separate value systems. And since social media is not only used by American citizens, and it is used by people worldwide, imposing the restrictions that align with our values will become problematic for other individuals and will restrict their freedoms of expression that have been allotted by their country's constitutions and their country's laws. So instead, the negative offers another alternative to making social media legally responsible for content posted by users. Instead, social media should be advised to place certain restrictions on hate speech, on harassment and bullying. And we've already seen that transition being made in the past couple of years, with Twitter blocking certain users that are provoking hate speech or provoking harassment after the Capitol attacks. And we've seen even Reddit close down 2,000 subreddits that were anti-LGBTQ or anti-certain communities. So social media is already taking these steps on their own, but holding them legally responsible, allowing citizens to take them to court and trying them and making them pay specific dues is going to harm them and ultimately limit free speech by closing down social media and preventing the growth of new sites, especially newer sites who may not have high profit margins, who may not be able to afford monitoring the posts that users make on a long-term basis. So before as I conclude my argument, I just want to reiterate some of the points that I made throughout. I talked about how you shouldn't be punishing the messenger social media is a site, it's a publishing site and although they can place limitations to prevent harm from being done, if something slips through the cracks, they shouldn't be harmed because there are hundreds, millions of hours of videos being uploaded, posts being made, and to expect a couple thousands of moderators to be able to catch everything is problematic. Second was lawsuits will end up harming small companies and even big companies if the lawsuits come one after another, which is very likely considering the millions of users use social media. And the third was the First Amendment still applies. So limiting content or making them legally responsible for content posted by other users would be limiting the user's right, First Amendment right of expression. And then I also talked about how liberties and how this would be logistically problematic. And the alternate solution I provided was instead enforcing certain legal restrictions on social media. If that is a big concern, instead of making them legally responsible, have them impose certain restrictions on their sites to monitor content. Thank you.
Thank you. Negative. Affirmative, would you like some prep time? 2, 3 minutes?
3 minutes. Okay, I'm ready.
Sounds good. The affirmative, you may offer your cross-examination for 3 minutes. You may start whenever you're ready.
So I would like to start off by thanking the negative for bringing up such great points. But I do have a question. First of all, do you understand what monitoring is? And second of all, why would these companies monitor if they're not held accountable?
What I'm saying, okay, so by monitoring, it means looking through the posts or flagging certain keywords and looking at the posts that have those certain keywords. For example, if it's child pornography, you might look for words or look for images that might entail child pornography. However, and then sorry, what was the second half of your question?
It was, why would these companies monitor if they're not held accountable?
So by held accountable, I'm not saying they shouldn't be held accountable. I'm saying they should not be legally responsible for the content posted by their users. However, if certain content is flagged or they have or is flagged by a user or by their own systems and they let that content remain on their websites, then that is problematic. Then they're allowing harmful content to remain on their websites, but they shouldn't be strictly responsible for the content posted by their users because they're not the user. They don't choose the words the user uses. The user chooses those words, and then once that is posted, and after that they find out about it, then they become responsible for the user's words and continuing to maintain that on their website.
Did you know that for the last 4 years, the QAnon conspiracy was been trying to be tackled, and then only in 2020 were these the social media networks able to get it down? It took 4 years. Did you know that?
Can you explain what the Q and Y conspiracy was?
It was a conspiracy theory that was spread throughout. Even it was proof that the person who was the head of the Capitol Hill attack actually believed in this too. So
this relates to the Capitol Hill attack.
No, it was a conspiracy theory, and it was against it was sort of problematic, like most conspiracy theories, and sort of attacked the protection of the citizens. Yeah.
So then that is a completely different discussion in itself. If social media is unable to or is unwilling to take down certain content, then they become legally responsible. But that doesn't mean they're legally responsible for the user's actions to choose to post a conspiracy theory. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where Reddit, after the past attacks earlier this year, started taking out certain subreddits that promoted harassment towards certain groups and promoted hate speech. So they are taking this action, but that doesn't mean they're responsible for the users who choose to conduct hate speech on their services and choose to use their services in that manner. So they can't prevent it from happening, but they can prevent it from spreading, and they can limit the extent of the people it affects.
So
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So do you believe that if they were originally held accountable for what was posted, this would be taken down a lot faster than 4 years?
Held accountable has
time is up.
Okay.
The affirmative. Please offer your rebuttal for 4 minutes, unless you would like some prep time.
I'd like some prep time, please.
3 minutes?
Yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
Affirmative, you have 4 minutes to offer your rebuttal, and you may start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I would start off by clarifying something that was said by the negative. She said that I hadn't stated whether it was US or global. Well, actually, I had. I mentioned South Sudan, I mentioned Mexico, and I mentioned Myanmar. This is a global issue. And then she had mentioned that by implementing these certain restrictions, we are infringing or we're somehow contradicting or conflicting with values because global values vary. But I would like to direct your attention to the UN SDGs, specifically SDG number 16 that states peace, justice, and strong institution, and SDG 3 that says good health and well-being. These SDGs are global values. Under these restrictions will be made, so we are not restricting, we're not conflicting with any global values because these global values are already standard for everyone. And then like I previously mentioned, one of the regulations should be accountability. You had mentioned monitoring, and I would like to bring to the attention that Facebook employs hundreds and thousands of people every single year to monitor. If monitoring was so successful, why are we still debating this today? The issue still stands. Monitoring doesn't work, and by implementing these liabilities on these companies, they will have stronger monitoring systems so that when actually they find something, they'll deal with it so they don't get in trouble. This is an incentive for companies to do the right thing and not linger it or ignore it till the problem escalates. And you also mentioned that it's a battle of money. My question is, if it's a battle of money, are we going to scare away and not protect the vulnerable of our community? As we know, terrorist groups have been taking children from their families for the longest time ever, and social media has only facilitated this. So under the name of battle for money, are we going to let the vulnerable of our nation or of our world, the future leaders of tomorrow, go? You say that if we take down if the companies take down the post, there's no need to be held accountable. Like I said before, the QN conspiracy theory posts took 4 years to track and take down. There's no incentive for these companies to take it down. Why would they hurt their users? Why would they cut down on their revenue, their ad revenue? Like I said before, Facebook's had billions of dollars in ad revenue, which is rooted from the amount of people they have. There is no incentive. Therefore, we need to make these companies legally responsible for the content. So these are taken down faster so the damage is not already done. 4 years is more than enough to make the damage done, integrated in society, and hurt people. You also mentioned that why do we punish the messenger? Let me clarify, it is not a messenger, it's a facilitator. There's a difference between a messenger. Messenger takes the mail and gives it to a person. Facilitator spreads it. It is not the question of a messenger. It is taking these thoughts and spreading it, integrating in our society. 7-year-olds are using social media platforms these days. The facilitators need to be held legally responsible so that they know what to facilitate. You also mentioned that it's abridging our First Amendment rights. First Amendment rights give us the right to speech. So are you saying that this right of speech gives speech for hatred? So exploitation, speech of terrorism, xenophobia? Absolutely not. We are protecting the rights of our people by holding these companies legally responsible so that the wrong information doesn't spread. So that we have the freedom of speech for the right things, and our generations and generations later are protected from the atrocities of our world. Thank you.
Thank you. Affirmative. Negative, would you like prep time? Or
Yes,
are
please.
you ready? 3 minutes?
Okay, I'm good to go now.
Negative, you may now offer your rebuttal for 6 minutes. This is your final word in the debate, so just remember that no new evidence can be brought up at this time. You may start whenever you're ready.
So as I mentioned when I was asked answering the cross-examination, Q&C is a completely separate discussion. That is about social media not taking responsibility for hosting a specific controversy. That is not about social media taking responsibility for what the user decided to post. Those are two completely separate discussions that need to be had in two separate resolutions, which is why I'm going to instead turn my focus on what you mentioned about terrorism, exploitation, child pornography, sexual trafficking. There are already laws in place that prevent social media from allowing those types of posts to be made. And if social media violates those laws, then that they are held legally responsible for violating those laws and allowing child pornography to be hosted on its website, allowing stuff that promotes terrorism, promotes hatred and hate speech to be continued on their website. And YouTube, if you watch a YouTube video, it has the option to report certain types of videos for being hatred, for promoting exploitation, for being criminally related. So those limitations are already in place. And when it comes down to monitoring, it becomes problematic. Again, you mentioned how it becomes problematic because yes, countries do have different sets of values. And even if the UN has a set of standardized values, those values may not translate to all countries. First of all, not all countries are part of the United Nations. Second of all, those values are limited in scope. You mentioned health and fitness, but I don't know if those values, again, I don't know much about that, but I don't know if those values cover everything that people post on social media. So then this is the last time I will be speaking. I just wanted to go over and talk about the points that I brought up earlier. Social media, restricting social media and making it legally responsible for people's actions will hurt small social media companies initially. And big companies may be able to sustain the initial hit, but small companies that do not have a large profit margin, you kept mentioning Facebook that has billions of dollars in profit margins, but other social media companies may not be able to sustain the legal battles that will initially ensue. And the second, so that will hurt the growth of social media, and that will hurt freedom of speech because now you're limiting the venues individuals have to share their thoughts and feelings. Second idea, I believe I covered this already, was it would be logistically problematic. How would you regulate the posts made internationally if they're made in a separate language, or if they are even made about separate topics that may be of value to that population, but may conflict with the ideals that are proposed by the United States Constitution? Because even though there are certain values that might be shared between countries, there are others that there is dispute over. And third was the one that I proposed the alternate solution for. Instead of holding them legally responsible for the user's actions, they should be held legally responsible for the content they allow to be posted on their websites. And they're already being done so from Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. They're legally held responsible for hosting content that has child pornography, that includes exploitation, that includes terrorism, which you kept bringing up, and includes criminal and intellectual property laws violations. And based on that, how much time do I have left? Sorry.
2.5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. And based on that, again, just reiterating those ideas that social media is a venue for individuals to share their ideas and thoughts. And yes, hate speech might be wrong, but it is not illegal under the United States law. It is a part of our freedom of speech. And social media does not necessarily have the right to restrict that freedom of speech. It should and does have the right to restrict speech that can cause harm to individuals or that does provoke violence in other individuals. And as such, the negative wants to reaffirm its standing on a resolution that social media companies should not be legally responsible for the content posted by users on their platforms. And if there is a need to create change, and if there is a need to help people and to protect people and to keep them from fear of being attacked or for fear of being prejudiced against, then there are certain other actions that we can take. We can increase monitoring. We can make monitoring more effective. We can hold social media companies legally responsible for the content that is allowed to be hosted on the website instead of being legally responsible for the content specifically posted by their users. And that concludes my argument. Thank you.
Thank you. Negative. Now the affirmative, would you like prep time?
Yes, I would.
3 minutes?
Mhm. I can start now.
Okay, affirmative, you may now offer your second rebuttal for 3 minutes. This is also your final word in the debate. So no new evidence may be brought up, and this is the final speech of the debate. You may start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would like to start by saying that the negative actually agrees to my point when they say that monitoring should be used. When we monitor, what monitoring is talking about is a reactive monitoring. Monitoring 20 hours after the post has been made, the damage has been done. What the affirmative is suggesting is a proactive monitoring. By proactive monitoring and holding these companies legally responsible, then they'll do it simultaneously or before the post goes through, so that the 20 million people don't see it, are scarred for their life, and then they take the post down. And to clarify, the negative kept saying that the QAnon was a completely separate debate topic. I'd like to bring to her attention that it is exactly what we're talking about here today. If that post, if we were holding these companies legally responsible, that first post promoting that conspiracy theory wouldn't have gotten in the first place. So I wouldn't have 4 years to grow afterwards and then realize that it needed to be taken down. It was our failure in holding these companies legally responsible that extended this misery for 4 years. Hence, it is the exact same debate topic. And then you also say that the UN values may not comply with all the other countries' values, and you also say not all the nations in the world are part of the UN. Though you may be correct, I would like to tell you that 196 countries are part of the United Nations. And when they all sign on to the United Nations, they agree to the values of the United Nations, SDGs and MDGs. Therefore, if their values do not comply with the UN, they wouldn't have signed on in the first place. You also say that the small companies may not be able to cope with this, and the bigger companies like Facebook would be able to cope with the initial hit. Yes, you may be right, but are we seriously bringing small businesses and economics into this debate when the other side, when on the other part of the scale, it is the question of the life, the livelihood, the protection of our vulnerable, of our people? And yes, you say that though the values in one nation may differ to the values of another nation and may not comply to the values of the United States, Constitution, you say that we don't want to violate, I say that we don't want to violate human rights under the umbrella of local values. In South Sudan, that girl whose bid was increased through Facebook, slavery is outlawed in Sudan, yet it's still happening. And the facilitators are these social media companies. I'd like to remind everybody here today that life first, then liberty, then the pursuit of happiness. To protect our people, we must hold social media companies accountable and legally responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Affirmative. And that marks the end of our debate finals. Thank you all for coming. I would now like to call upon the judges to give overall impressions and feedback. And either of you may begin.
Daniel, I'll defer to you. Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Oh, you can go first.
All right, sure thing. So firstly, good job, both of you. That was a great debate. I myself have come from a debate background, so I used to do this a lot in high school and some in college, and even when I was competing in Miss way back, I did Lincoln Douglas style debate. So this is something I'm pretty familiar with and near and dear to me. So seeing it again at this kind of caliber was awesome. So big applause for both of you guys. You both did excellent. There's a lot of little things I can nitpick on, but I want to try to like flush out the overall, like Hibbo was saying. So I think overall you guys both did a great job in using evidence. What I would say, just like going forward, when you guys continue to do debate, if you choose to, is just flush out the citation a little bit more and explain what the source is, and maybe explain what the case is a little bit more. You both did that to an extent, but I would have liked to see it a little bit more. Just for anybody, watching the debate, or even, for judges or those who are looking upon it, you want to be able to explain your source or explain your evidence in a way that a person who knows nothing about debate or the topic or whatever you're citing can pick up on it and be like, all right, I get this now, I'm an expert. So just fleshing that out a little bit more, it would definitely be very helpful, and also kind of push along your points a little bit better. But what I did like, you both did very well in the rebuttals, jumping ahead in the debate. You both were able to analyze each other's points, pick up on, points of attack, and where can we insert arguments, and what are the key things that were said. So that was very good from both of you. Definitely just keep expanding upon that as you keep going. Keep listening for, what are those key points, like 1, 2, 3, get them down, and then how can I respond to them? And the better you can do in responding to your opponent's points, the better you'll do in the debate. And we kind of saw it at the end there with the point about the UN values. You guys went back and forth with that, and that was key. And sometimes it's whoever gets the last word in kind of wins it, but focus on the quality and focus on the points you make. And at the end of the day, it's, whatever makes the most sense is what's gonna go across. Other than that, I have a lot jotted down, so I'm just trying to paraphrase as much as I can. I think to just start off the debate, I didn't really see it from either side too much, so it doesn't really hurt or help either of you. But when starting the debate, I think a good technique is defining, specifically what is the topic addressing, and what are the key words. And if you can't come to an agreement between the two of you, then it's whoever can kind of push that narrative with some evidence. I saw it a little bit in the beginning with, I think one of you, I think the affirmative side was pushing what social responsibility and legal responsibility, the difference between those two, and that's good. There was a little bit of a pushback from the negative side, but I would have liked to see from both of you in the further rounds, just defining more what is it that we're talking about and how does this apply to my side. Sorry, ignore the clock. Other than that, I think you both had very strong closings, and overall, your speech, your organizational and kind of speech skills were very, very good from both sides. You both can talk your way out of situations, which is very good to see for debaters. So keep working on that, keep getting better, expanding that vocabulary as as normal or tedious as that sounds, it helps a lot going forward. So that's all good stuff. And I think that's it from me. Anything else Daniel can probably catch on?
Yeah, Salam. Yeah, he said a lot of more stuff, so I'll just touch on a few things that were similar. For one, again, both y'all, I feel like, did a pretty good job in terms of, like, for example, and like pure, like your speech style and things like that. I thought that was really good. I do feel like both arguments, though, needed more structure. He touched on this as well, that, for example, when you're stating your source, it needs more detail, because you do need to assume that the judges know nothing about the topic. So you need to assume that it's hard to come across that because you have been doing countless research on these things. So you just assume that everyone knows what you're talking about, but you do have to assume you're talking to someone who knows nothing at all. So when you say your sources and whatnot, you need to be very detailed and very specific. Branching off of that, structure is really important. Like, for example, when you're starting your negative speech, you want to make sure to state your framework. Like, first, I'm going to say my points and then counter what the firm said, or vice versa. It helps the judge know where to start so they can keep track of what's going on and obviously be better at, actually keeping score and what's good and whatnot. So that needs a bit more work, just pure structure. And also, I feel like a few times the arguments are starting to get a little hypothetical. That is something that we should avoid, because, for example, at one point we were talking about that, yeah, the argument was that if it was global, you can't force certain things upon other countries who have different values and rights. My question was, what values, what rights? Make that specific so we know. Because if you're just saying, oh, this would cause this, you don't know what you're actually causing. We need to know what it is so that you have an actual argument. If you get too hypothetical, quite frankly speaking, there is no argument, But I agree with the other judge. The rebuttals are really good. I thought that once one rebuttal happened, I thought that was a really good point, but then the affirmative came back and had another rebuttal. I was like, oh, it's tough, So I thought that was good. So in conclusion, really good rebuttals, really good style of speaking, but things that need more focus in the future, if you do intend to do more debate, is structure and be more concise and avoid hypotheticals, because getting the hypotheticals will derail the argument and you won't go anywhere. But that's pretty much it. Other than that, I thought that was a good job.
This marks the end of our debate finals. Thank you so much to our competitors and our judges, and please stay tuned for the award ceremony happening afterwards.